Great. Some of you may have seen us sort of thrashing around a bit earlier. Unfortunately, our original chair went to the wrong venue. So, unfortunately, no, I'm kidding. No, sorry, Kat. She's actually unwell, but so we're stepping in a bit. We were angling for a bit of diversity, but sadly, it's just not going to happen. So, thank you for coming to #Value of Social Media, which we think and tell from the room is a very interesting and important topic, both from a business development perspective, compliance perspective, and also just general communication perspective, because it's obviously a very important part of our lives now. Very delighted to be joined by Craig, Ashley, and Dylan, who all have very unique insights into the different powers and challenges that social media has for business, and also they have a lot of experience working with insurance. So that should be some really interesting insight for everybody. My name is Sebastian. I'm the Managing Director of Market Minds. We're a consultancy and events business working in the insurance market, mainly focusing on insurtech initiatives and helping insurance companies engage with innovation strategy. So I'm just going to very quickly ask Dylan if you could start just a quick intro, who you are, where you come from, and why you're here, and what you're doing with social media currently.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dylan, founder of Social. We're an MGAA, and we've redesigned insurance to be consumer-centric. What does that mean? If you have a claim, it's an amazing experience, and if you don't, you get rewarded. And you can get up to 80% money back every year if you and your friends don't claim. And we started with mobile phones, but our model is applicable across consumer lines. And I can see the underwriters in the room going, "Oh, how does that work?" It does. So we're a consumer, for and foremost consumer brand, but we do actually also serve corporates, because our proposition is actually amazing for companies for their mobile phone insurance, because it's not only an employee cost-saving tool, but it's also an employee engagement tool. So go to the website for more information on that. So we use social media as part of our overall marketing strategy, and both in several aspects. The acquisition is one of them, but also engagement and kind of communication and engaging in conversation with our customers. And that's kind of across it can be across your customer experience, not just around kind of discovery of your brand, but it also be about kind of fulfilling your claims, or kind of answering any questions you might have along the way as your customer journey. I suppose the kind of headlines I'd say is every channel is very specific, and for not only a demographic but also a mindset. So if you think about it, if you're on Facebook, your mindset is very different to when you're actually on LinkedIn, and so those would be very different messages which are going to have to be kind of communicated to engage the reader. So there's no kind of golden bullet in any one of these channels. It's just hard graft work of actually figuring out what is the core messaging that you have that's specific to you, which actually is going to be resonating with your end customer. So understanding your end customer is number one aspect. And we're doing mobile phone insurance, but if there's 48 million people in the UK with mobile phone insurance, so it's not going to be targeting that is not very viable. So you've got to be very clear on what you start with. What I'd say also is, so it's partly on kind of acquisition, but also on engaging. So that's just across the customer experience. So if you think about it, it's not just around are you able to kind of find out more about the proposition, but also where you're on your claim process. And finally, it can also be about kind of any conflict resolution that you might be having. And I think on that point is actually quite an important one, because I think that's where the foe comes in. What we've actually found is that social media is a delightful tool for fraudsters, because they know it's important for brands to have good reviews, and so what they will do is actually throw in really nasty reviews to try and get away with the murder they're trying to commit. And it's a tough situation. That's interestingly enough, I think the trust, the likes of Trustpilot and other type of reviewing sites are becoming more aware of this. But it is something to be aware of, is as when you start being online, you're kind of exposed. And so it is understanding how you're going to be managing that and there might be some genuine times when you just, the process isn't as slick as you have designed it to be. But it's also being mindful that in an area where there is fraud, especially consumer lines, and we're doing mobile phone insurance, so it's rife. We're very mindful, actually, kind of detecting it and deterring it. But some people will try their luck. So I think that's where the faux element comes in.
Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, Ashley Spooner from Brand Experience. So the reason why we're here is we're a full-service agency, primarily based up in Norwich, work across the really quite specialised in the insurance sector, so that's anything from brokers to underwriters, the whole kit and caboodle. And I personally been working in social media for pretty much ever since it started.
When did it start, actually?
When did it start? Well, it must be 20 years ago, because I've been doing this for about 20 years, 15. Don't ask me questions about age.
Noted.
It was like when it was called like Web 2.0. That was one of my first roles, was head of Web 2.0. Right. Yeah, so I'd totally echo what Dylan has just said there. We would see that social media plays a part of someone's marketing mix, but we probably don't see it as, in this industry specifically, as working on its own. So where you might be able to launch a business or whatever purely on social media, we would definitely see it in some sectors as an element for which you probably need to have a strategy, which I think you're going to talk about. But that strategy for your social media, which channels work well for you and what the audience is on the specific channel, but it is a strategy that would need to fit in, and it works best when it works in, I don't know what the word is here, but it's very much a good fit for the rest of the strategy. And that's just true of all of the clients we work with, and that can be insurance, that can be not-for-profit, that can be retail, that can be education, that can be religion. So if you think the FCAA, or the FCA are sort of hard taskmasters, you wait until you start working with the Church of England, because they are answering to a different master.
Well, that is the idea, I think.
Yeah.
Greg?
Thank you. I mean, I've been working in this industry specifically for about 11 years. I'm from Full Circle Communications, and we deal with the corporate communications side within, again, the kind of financial services sector, a bit wider, but very kind of focused on insurance. And we've got a number of clients in this room that we've worked with, and we've got a presence in here as well, working with the MGAA for a number of years. And I think I remember when I first started working in this sector, I worked in the alcohol sector before this, so moving over to insurance was a perfect fit. But the first kind of conversations we had, we were doing some lunch and learns with brokers, and I kind of ran this whole 45-minute session very young and enthusiastic, and these brokers at the end of it said, "That's great, but I'm not going to do it." I was like, "Well, why not?" They said, because I just want to bury my head in the sand. I don't want to know what people are saying about us. I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to be there. And we've still got clients saying the same thing 11 years later. And I think, as Ashley said, it's the strategic point of view that's coming into play now, that social media has been touted as, and I think Dylan used the phrase, the golden bullet. It's still seen as, if we can get on Twitter, if we can get 1,000 followers on Facebook, it's going to grow our business. And a lot of the time it's not. And a lot of the time you're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort and a lot of resources on something that's never going to be right for your target audience. And I think this is where the kind of work that we're doing, and probably why a lot of you are in this room, is trying to understand how you actually use it. And this bit that Ashley talks about strategy, and that's kind of where we're looking at it now, because there's so many businesses jumping to execution. We're saying, we just need to get on it. We just need to start writing content. We just need to start tweeting. And you do it, and it might work. And you might get someone that's lucky, and they go, "Oh, yeah, okay, I remember that you're there now. I want to come back and read something else," and that's fine. But it's very unlikely to work, unless you've really thought about, who are we? What do we stand for? What do we sell? Who do we sell it to? And what role does this as a channel play? And usually the social part is there for not selling, like Dylan has proven that you can, but a lot of the people in this room, it's going to be more at the corporate end, and it's there as that touch point. It's a way of reaching your audience. It's a way of reminding them who you are and what you do, celebrating the good news stories, defending the negative ones. And then the rest of it is how it plays in that wider mix. So how are you using it alongside email? How are you using it alongside promoted activity? How are you using it alongside your PR? And I'm sure some of you have questions that we can answer and go into a bit of detail as a panel to kind of give you some solutions on that. But it's very much that target piece. Understand your market, understand your reasons for being on it, and then start thinking about which channel and what the content's likely to be.
Thank you very much, all of you. And speaking of which, we have to slightly practice what we preach here. So I hope everyone's tweeting at UK MGAA. So if anyone's not, they really should be. To understand the power of social media. And we've got Slido here, which is it's on your web tool. It's not actually an app. If you go on www.slido.com, hashtag MGAA 2018, you can just submit questions to the panel and we can answer anything that you have. Some of them we've actually already had pre-submitted, which is social media a friend or foe for insurance? Oh, that's a poll. Sorry. Sorry about that. So we've got a poll. Is social media a friend or foe? So please go on Slido and let us know what you think, and then we can actually show the results later on.
Seb, you use social media. How do you use it?
Very badly and quite erratically, but it seems to work. No, I found, well, actually some stats. I did a bit of research earlier, and I was actually pretty amazed about the statistics on social media. So I found 330 million monthly users are on Twitter, which is pretty amazing. LinkedIn, 500 million, and Instagram, 1 billion. And Facebook, of course, owns Instagram, and they have 2.19 billion monthly users. And in total, that's about 3 billion users in total monthly using social media, which is absolutely incredible. And we've got a database of 1 million people, and we basically we send a lot of newsletters and that sort of thing. But actually, our traction with social media is so much better. Because you can engage the conversations, tag other people's work, intelligent people with thought-provoking content. You can tag that and claim it as your own, which is just great. But really, the point is that you can really engage your target market in the messages that they want, and also sort of associate yourself with that. And I find that is way more effective than just punching out emails to a database. So I sort of think that actually email and that sort of communication is slightly sort of passé, 2.0, as you were saying, and the future of communication, both business and socially, is entirely social media and online.
I think I'd agree with that, and I think a big part of that is partly understanding the platforms, and I think a lot of what you're talking about there is that kind of push messaging. So you're pushing content out by email, you're doing the same thing by social, and I think it's recognising, and Dylan talked about that word engagement, what is going to engage, and actually in this space there's a lot of brands broadcasting. And I think that's where the change is coming, is it's recognising that this is an audience-led platform, and the word social isn't there by mistake. You wouldn't go down the pub and just stand on a chair and shout at everyone, or you might if you weren't happy with the result last night, depending on your personality. But you would go and have a conversation. You'd listen to other people's point of view. You'd pick up on the cues when they were interested, when they were sitting forward, when they were buying you another pint because they wanted you to stay. And I think it's trying to use social that way as a business and recognise that your end customer or the end kind of audience that you're trying to reach don't all think the way that you do. They don't all think the same. And it's using that to kind of say, right, yeah, here is this influencer that they're engaging with. So we can use that. We can put our own message over the top of it. We can spin it our way. And we can take a bit of ownership of that conversation, a bit of ownership of that traffic. But you have to be smart with that. And I think it's not that you can't just have the 22-year-old in the corner of the office who manages your social channels. They're not going to understand the depth of conversation they could have. This has got to be a business-wide platform that has a customer services angle, has a marketing angle, has a communications angle, and everything else in between.
So as part of a sort of broader customer engagement piece that actually, as you were saying, isn't just, so-and-so marketing just having a crack. You really need to have a proper strategy. And with insurers, we always talk about how insurers don't know who their customers are and blah, blah, blah. So working with insurance companies, actually, have you found that's been a challenge, actually trying to help them identify who their customers are?
Well, I mean, the first challenge with a lot of them but that's true of a lot of big-ish companies, is the fear that someone's going to say something wrong or controversial on social media, and the bad press that will rain down on them as a result of that. And I think that is largely because it's a regulated industry, and they will have read in the newspaper, they've seen lots and lots of horror stories where someone's said the wrong thing or something out of context, and they've just got absolutely pillared for it. But that's the way to overcome that, is like Craig says, is to have someone who does it for you rather than an add-on to their job or the office junior, someone who understands the potential for that damage, and then you can avoid it. It is relatively straightforward not to get drunk and start tweeting about your brands. That's just, and you can have guidelines and policies that, as long as you're familiar with them, you know what you can say and you can't say. So it's relatively easy. It is a fear, but it's relatively easy to get over. And then you need to encourage them to understand that, like you just said, that it's not just a broadcast. It's not like email where you're just sending it out. This is one of the key metrics that we'd use and would measure for any clients is the engagement rate, rather than the reach or the number of followers they've got, because that's the sort of number they'll report back to their MD or chair, but actually it's the engagement that they've had and the sort of conversations that they may have had. And you can take those offline if you want to get really into the nitty-gritty about it, so telephone numbers or emails, that sort of thing can be exchanged, and that to us would be a key. That's the key for us, is that engagement piece.
There are two things I'd like to add on this. I'm not sure social media is the future only, and I think we discussed about kind of a holistic approach to marketing. I think that's a very important aspect. Right now, email, which kind of we're just done with all those kind of newsletters that we've pseudo signed up to, and get not yours, Jane, you're great. I think just getting all those kind of inbound mailings, which are often not very relevant and not particularly pertinent to the point and place where you're at. And I think that's something which will probably evolve over time. But what I find quite interesting is that, direct mail, those leaflets in the door, like 20 years ago, they were just like, you just would automatically take that kind of bunch straight into the bin. And now, because it's not used that much, it's actually a very effective tool. And so I think there are cycles for different platforms. And I think social media at the moment is kind of in its infancy, and we're not at saturation yet. But there's going to be a point where we're just so fed up of having ads on our different mediums. We'll be fed up of all this kind of content overload, and then there'll be some other kind of new wave that will be coming through. And so I think that's kind of a thought on from that perspective. And I had a second point, but I've just completely forgotten.
Dylan, do you think you would have do you think your business would be able to be where it is today without current social media presence in the way it is? And would you like it to double, and how much effect would you think that would have on it?
So, put your hands up if you're actually using social media as part of your organizations right now. Okay, there's a whole bunch of people who are not.
Yep.
And they've got kind of existing kind of healthy businesses, no doubt. So I don't think it's a kind of a must-have. It is a channel as others are. I think, that's the second point I was wanting to make earlier, is actually the key about it is actually having a holistic view on your customer interactions. And I think that's also one of the fears that people have when they actually have to introduce it. Is that if you start realizing that you've got your LinkedIn, you've got your Twitter, you've got your Insta, your Facebook, you're going to have maybe what we have is kind of your live chats, and then you have all the interactions you might have with your customers when they claim, or have any other interactions that you might have if you're still on paper. How do you bring them all into one single view to be able to make sure the conversation is relevant for the customer in view of what they've had before? And I think there are tools out there which help you do that, but I think that's a pretty important one, where if you don't do that, you're at high risk of having a very kind of effectively kind of schizophrenic conversations with the single customer in a way that actually will put them off more than actually have the desired effect of having an engaged conversation.
So I think it seems that it's, we definitely, the message is, have a clear strategy. It could be very effective, but, it's dangerous out there. What about ROI? What about metric? How do you say that actually we spend all this time and money investing in social media, and, how do you actually, analyse whether or not it's actually been effective?
Yeah, I think on Ashley's point, those kind of the ego-stroking metrics of how many followers and how many impressions are worthless. It's actually much more about, well, why are you on it? And are you trying to grow your business? In which case, how many customers have you acquired through it? How many leads are you generating? How many meetings have you been able to book because of it? And I think it all comes back to your strategy in the first place, and the kind of the marketing speak, which we don't want to do too much of, but kind of fueling the funnel is the big phrase still. And I think that's where social plays a massive role in that, because you've got your awareness driving, and that business broadcasting bit, there is a role for social to play in that, because you still need to get your name out there. It's an increasingly noisy world. Content marketing is still a buzzword. Everyone's creating content. A lot of it is full of disinformation and is not factual, but it's still there, and you've still got to compete with it. So first challenge is drive awareness, and by doing that you do need to think about impressions, and you do need to think about reach, but you've got to then look past that and say, and what's next? Then it's the kind of the consideration element. So how are we proving that people are considering either talking to us as a business, becoming a client or a customer? And that stage is much more, the metrics are around engagement, so clicks. Are they coming through to your website? Are they liking? Are they retweeting? Are they following you? Are they signing up to your email newsletters? And then it's that point of conversion. What does that actually mean? Do they sign up to be a customer? Do they place their insurance with you? Or are they converting into a different way and saying, yeah, I want you to come and meet me, or I want a callback, or I want to download that fact sheet or that white paper, whatever it might be. And it's just, again, kind of really moving that bit through. But one aspect, actually, I'd be interested with Dylan. There's a lot of businesses that have build social very centrally, and they've built referrals as a huge kind of part of that. So not only are you focused on signing people up, but then using them to go out there and be your advocates. And I got an Uber here, and Uber has the very good code, send this off, you get £10 back, and the person you sent it to gets £10. It's great, and it means that I've probably used that 6-7 times. Is that something you've built into your kind of business model, or thinking about building in?
Well, it's part of our business model. The whole point about you being able to you can get up to 80% money back every year if you and your friends don't claim. And the way it works is you buy a policy, you're covered, and then you can connect to your friends. Every time you connect to a friend, both you and your friend both get £10 added to each of your reward pots. Each one can actually connect to as many people as they want until their reward pot is worth 80% of the value of their premium. At the end of the year, if you and your connections have not claimed, then you get the money back. So it's like a mutual no claims bonus. And that's part of our embedded in our model. Clearly, social media is an effective tool to actually have that sharing. But to be honest, actually, interestingly enough, people share probably more so through other means of communication, whether they're WhatsApp, they're texting, emails, rather than necessarily going broadcasting on Facebook.
On the subject of working with insurers and going back to that, is there a common denominator with the ones who are really using it well, and also the ones that aren't using it particularly well? Would you say there are sort of core things that they're doing correctly, that advice to the audience essentially, and also on the other hand, one's denominator they're not doing it well?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean the ones where I think they're using it well is where they're not just seeing it, like I said earlier, about just broadcasting content out. The ones who are using it well is where they are allowing them to develop a personality in their social media, because that's what it was originally for. It was for me to talk to you guys about going out and whatnot. The ones who there might be a word called corporized, but possibly not. The ones who make it so faceless and so... Yeah, that's the word, thank you. Then it does become very much a broadcast media, but where they allow a little bit of personality and a little bit of flex within the sort of brand guidelines, because they'll want to be talkative and friendly and approachable, all that sort of thing. And this is like an ideal opportunity for people to do that, and they need to just empower the person whose responsibility it is to do that, to just be able to not be so regimented. And that's why brands might say, well, we've set aside Thursday 2 till 4 to check our social media and plan it. That's not how social media works. It is 24/7, weekends, outside of office hours. So you need someone on it. There's no point. You can't have a conversation with someone if they ask the question or comment on Saturday afternoon and you get back to them Thursday because that's the slot. You're going to check social media. That's the shittest conversation. So you need someone in it all the time who can respond to that. So those are the ones who are doing it well.
And we've spoken a lot about external, but what about the advantages of using it internally? Big corporations.
Yeah.
Some corporations employ tens of thousands of people. Is there a great advantage to be had with engaging your own staff? Social media.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're going to be, or should be, the biggest advocates of it for a kick-off. I mean, lots of clients will set up, like in the education sector, for example, a class will have their own social media account, and the teacher will be saying, you need to get your homework in tomorrow, or who hasn't done it, and they'll use it in that respect. And that's a great way of doing it.
Yeah.
So, or a WhatsApp group, and I can see that totally working for a department within an insurance company, and they do it.
I've seen that also. There are some other platforms like Drive or other which actually are effectively created to allow lots of different kind of conversations taking place across the organisation.
Yeah.
I think often the biggest issue of actually adopting those platforms is actually people being voicing their views, because typically in organisations it's quite hierarchical, and if you're junior, you're meant to be listening, not talking.
Yeah.
And so, but the reality is good ideas don't come necessarily only from the top. They come from everywhere. And it's you have to actually have a big effort and big shift on getting your employees comfortable with the idea that they actually broadcast their ideas across the organisation. Because it could be immediately you if you're kind of from an original kind of traditional mindset, it's a massively double-edged sword where actually there's more downside than upside in actually posting anything.
No, I agree. Yeah. I think I was on a panel last year at the IMPRAs, and the head of communications from LV was on it as well. And he had just taken under his remit the social team, the internal comms, the external comms, the corporate comms, every aspect, so that he was controlling all of those, because they had recognised that they all have to work together. And
is he still at LV?
He is. He is. He's still doing it. But I think we're increasingly starting to work with internal HR teams and looking to not just as a kind of recruitment tool as social, because that is the personality of the business, being able to say, actually, we are a fun place to work. We're not overly corporate, or we are corporate, but we've still got a personality. And I think the other aspect there is to then bring out that personality. So do you have people who are going above and beyond? Are they running in the London Marathon? Have they raised some money? Yeah. What are you doing for Health and Wellbeing Week? Are you getting kind of those incentives to get up and get out and kind of walk to work or whatever it might be, cycle to work schemes, those sorts of things that just show that you're greater than the sum of your brand, and that you're actually committing, you're investing, and you're building on those personality aspects. And I think it is just about that cultural shift of saying this isn't the senior people within the business controlling these channels. This is using it as a way to kind of bring out all of the internal side of that, and all of the individual personalities, all of the individual activities, and letting those people have a voice. And as a culture, you've got to foster that. It doesn't just come naturally.
And you're going to be harnessing your resources better, aren't you?
Completely.
I mean, I've worked in a few insurance companies, and it's it seems very normal that departments are very siloed and no one has any idea what's going on. There could be several innovation departments all happening at the same time, and they're all sort of, keeping their cards close to their chest. But if it's sort of, there's an internal sort of platform that's very transparent, you can see what everybody's doing, everyone can communicate with each other, that's surely only going to benefit the company in the long run.
Absolutely.
And attract, sort of tech-savvy people who like the culture that you're working in. So if you're trying to grow your business to become more tech-savvy, that surely is a no-brainer. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's very true. There's a documentary, given Trump is about to arrive here, there's a documentary on iPlayer at the moment of the New York Times and the first 100 days of Trump. And what I found absolutely fascinating was whenever something happened, it wasn't someone went off to a corner and they wrote an article about it. They got together. They got the Washington office, the New York office, someone who was the Trump investigator, and they just had a conversation. What's the angle? What's the relevance? What's the big story here? Then they had someone completely that hadn't been part of that team to review it before it went anywhere. So there were often 20, 30 people involved in any one story. It might be 200 words going up on the website, but it still had 20 people involved. And it was just that depth of thought, that depth of editorial thinking. And that's something that I think has kind of missed this industry a bit. That there are lots of individual teams writing individual pieces that might be valuable, but they're not as valuable as they could be because they haven't got that depth of knowledge. And I think we've got underwriters here that see a different viewpoint. You've got corporate communicators. You've got an office junior. They all see different things. They all hear different conversations. And trying to foster that conversation to bring it out, it takes work and it takes real consideration in terms of how to do that. And again, adding in the extra element of who your audience are and what they care about, that's editorial thinking. And there hasn't been a huge amount of that yet in this space, which is a great growth opportunity, I think.
And we have to talk about it, sorry, but compliance and regulation, actually, you mentioned it earlier. Is it a valid excuse for people to say, oh, well, compliance?
I mean, there is a valid excuse to be afraid of it. But there are guidelines, and I wouldn't necessarily think that the majority of your conversations or the content you'll be pushing out would necessarily be classed as a financial promotion. Because, like you said, it's an element of an awareness and engagement piece that may not necessarily be around a financial promotion. Therefore, not necessarily. Doesn't need to go through compliance department, and there's guidelines around. We're getting a bit of ambience going on.
Break into song. Where's the guitar?
Yeah. You're serving the wine. Well, I've lost my.
Are you fighting the FCA's in a minute?
Yeah, they're just shutting us down.
Yes, is it valid to be afraid of it? But there's well-trodden paths. As you said, it's been around for 20 years.
Exactly. There's guidelines up there with good examples of what you can and can't say, or what they would regard as not compliant or compliant. But I'd say that would be a small percentage of your conversations or your content will be around those sorts of subject matters. So 90, 85 maybe, % of the stuff you're talking about may not necessarily be in that FCA arena. Like you said, the walk to work, your 5-side teams taking part in blah, 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 blah. That's your personality. So that's, absolutely you're right to be, concerned about it, but there are guidelines so you can do it, but again, that's not a reason not to do it. Definitely not a reason not to do it.
Jane, would you like us to...
Okay, yeah, so we've got the results of the poll so far. It will get published at the end when everybody's finished. So only 8% of the people that have responded, which is 13 people, are using social media to acquire customers. But 69% are engaging with customers and 23% not using it at all. And then we've got a list of questions that have come through. The first one is, do companies need a dedicated social media manager?
Who wants to take that? I can do it. Kind of yes, to make sure that stuff happens. But it's not just their responsibility, I think, in that respect. There's a whole process that happens before you get to the point of content that is ready to go out on social media, and that can come down to the social media manager's role. But I think that process of getting that content, of making sure you've had that cross-section of the business involved in it, means that it's broader, so that they can be the champion for it, and they might take final responsibility to publish it, but they should be that conduit into the other parts of the business.
It feels that everyone, if you're in anything remotely salesy or related in business at all, you've got to know about social media.
I agree.
You can't develop business without knowing how to work email. I mean, maybe you can to some extent, but you've got to know how to use this stuff. So it feels like it's a necessary tool for everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
James Guthrie has asked, with Twitter now adopting video, is that the primary way forward for social media currently?
So Twitter's an interesting one. I have not come across yet a consumer brand which has actually used Twitter effectively acquire customers. So it really is more about engaging in conversations, and whether that's going to be through getting video, which will kind of create more of an engagement than you'd have otherwise. I mean, there's a good reason why all actually platforms have actually developed video, because it is a more engaging, richer content than just a static image. And image is already better than text, so you've kind of got a hierarchy of interest there from users. So that's, I suppose, but whether Twitter now becomes the go-to place as a result of just introducing video, I'm not certain about that. There's just so much noise on Twitter. I think people just don't really it's just part of what we were saying earlier. I think that one's a saturated channel.
I think it's got to be a really, really good video.
Yeah. And then it goes viral.
Yeah.
And how do
you are just
viral video?
I can tell. I'm not here. But if you are just scrolling through your phone, obviously 90% of the consumption is done there, then it has got to be a bit tidy to turn the sound on and sit down there on the tube and watch it. So that's why I think Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and probably LinkedIn, they'll class a video view as like a 3-second watch. And that is someone just pausing briefly, move on. So, I mean, it definitely is going to play a part. But I still think there's, sometimes a text, just a text only will get engagement better than a video because it's just very easy to consume. So,
although text is less easy to consume visually. There's less effort, more of an effort.
Yeah.
And I think videos, you have to have the text on that video, because as you said,
you've got to have the subtitles.
You're not going to turn the volume on.
No, not on a train or whatever. But yes, subtitles absolutely a given. But again, like a viral video, we've done a video. We didn't do it. But we got a client to do it, and because it was unexpected for that client to do this particular type of video. That absolutely rocked. So they may have 10,000 followers on Facebook, but that reached 300,000 people just by the people sharing it. So that is what I'd say. I don't know.
How many of those videos reached that?
But it went outside of their original community. So, but yeah, I'd say video's good, but it's not the be all and end all. So you don't, and it doesn't need. One thing I've found is it doesn't need to be uber professionally done. You can do it on a smartphone, and sometimes that little rough around the edges, like that video was rough around the edges. That was literally filmed by someone with a smartphone, so it had people rustling about in the background. That's kind of nice.
Well, you talked about that in personality of a lot.
Yeah, that's it.
Where you've had it cleansed by compliance and taken a lot of personality out. A video, somewhere like this, what have you got out of today?
Yeah.
How have I learned something new I'm going to bring back to my clients, to my customers? It's so much, it's raw, like you say, but
totally.
it's much more engaging and believable. And I think there's so much content in this industry that isn't believable because it's gone through a professionally very shot team, and you just don't believe it. You know it's been written for them. You know it's not them. It's not their words. And those kind of to camera, this is my belief, and I'm kind of happy to stand behind it. It takes some confidence, but if you can get it right, then there's a huge opportunity there.
100%.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left. We've got 2 more questions. How do you measure success from social media strategy? I think you've touched on this a bit before.
Did touch on it?
Yeah, I suppose, Dylan, from a growth point of view, do you have clear objectives that you're trying to reach on metrics that you think, oh, we're going to get that, or are you just measuring it on a daily basis to see what's working?
No, we are. I mean, we're deeply metric focused because we don't have the luxury of cash and time. So it has to be about performance. So, and as you said earlier, it does depend what you're trying to achieve out of the content or the ad that you're creating. So it's and everything, but you've got to be. It has to be tied down into what your ultimately everything should be tied down what your KPIs as a business are, and actually bring that all those kind of the metrics on any of those activities should be tied back to what the business metrics should be.
Yeah. I think from our point of view, there seems to be a bit of a cycle of social media metrics that you start off, it's very new, it's about that awareness driving and are we reaching people, are they starting to show an interest? Then you kind of switch more to a focus on engagement. You've got enough followers, you're reaching enough people, now are they actually reading our content? And that's very kind of different metrics. And then is it leading to adding value to our business? And that's the conversion aspect. And we do find that runs on a bit of a cycle, whether it's month on month or half year on half year or year on year. It kind of depends on your business model and who you're trying to talk to. But I think it is just, it's kind of knowing, again, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then you can set those measurements in place.
Yeah.
The last question, but we've only got a couple of minutes, is social media too much of an immediate media? When people, customers or employees tweet, for example, it can be an anger or haste and cause reputational damage, which again you touched on earlier.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk. But again, there's that cultural bit, and I mean, we've all talked about compliance and the fact we're in a regulated industry. Most of the people you employ are sensible people. Most of them know the company that they're in and have a company handbook even though they haven't read it. And I think a lot of that means that there is a policy in there that you will have written, and it means if they step outside the lines, then there's a disciplinary procedure, as it would with sending a rude email or talking about something they shouldn't or doing something to someone that they shouldn't. It's no different. So I think there's that. I mean, one example we had from a client that we were talking to, they were investment business, and they had a young trader, very excited about his new job, took a picture of his bacon sandwich on his desk without knowing that there's a load of trades on the screen in the background. And he is no longer in his job because there is a very strict rule, and they then had to rewrite the policy, re-educate everyone within it. So there is that sense of no bacon sandwiches allowed. But yeah, it's that sort of thing. Policy, but don't presume everyone's read it. Educate them about it and presume that they're sensible, but have a procedure if they're not.
And also, just think about, remember there was a story a few years ago where this person flew out from New York and made a comment about they were going to South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
And there's basically a whole... now, the thing is, you probably don't remember the name of the company that person was working for.
No.
Yeah. But the thing is, you do remember there's a person who actually got fired by the time they landed in Johannesburg, because by the time that their comment went viral, which was interpreted as pretty racist, and by the time they landed, basically the following for fire, whatever that person's name was just pretty, had gone viral. Yep. And so, needless to say, the company had no choice but to kind of thank them for their services. And I think in reality, I think it usually ends up with the individual being at risk more so than the organisation. Because I think most people kind of have a understanding that people. Individuals make those comments unless they actually are managing the company account and actually tweeting that on a company's behalf, then it becomes more problematic. But otherwise, because a lot of communications might still be from employees talking about the company and creating that vibe across their platforms.
Right. So
we're almost out of time.
Yep.
Do we have any questions from the audience, particularly those who aren't on Slido?
No burning questions. Well, just a few points. Seems to me you should be using it. It is serious, though, so take it seriously. Use it internally and externally. Have a strategy. create a clear personality for your business, and have governance and guidelines, and you should be fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good summary.
Anything else?
We're done.
Thank you all very much for coming.
Yes.